Parshas Miketz, page 222, and it's we're continuing with the discussion of Yosef, and Yosef is in jail at this point, and he has to, and as we know from the story, he comes out of jail. So it says that the Parsha begins that Pharaoh has these dreams, and these are very disturbing dreams for him. He's bothered by them. And they're also very odd dreams. If you read right here in the beginning, it says he dreams, and what does he dream? The first dream is that 7 cows, very beautiful cows, well-fed cows. Right? They're grazing by the edge of the Nile. And then 7 really skinny, emaciated, cows come out of the river, and they stand next, right, to them. And then they eat them. They eat the healthy ones. So the sick ones eat the healthy ones. And then he later has another dream, right? And it says that he has 7 ears of grain. Right? They're on one stalk, and they're very beautiful ears of grain. And then 7 other ears of grain come, and they're scorched and destroyed. Right? And then the ugly ones, the destroyed ones, they swallow up the healthy ones. Right? And he's bothered by this. It's an odd dream, but in his case, he thinks that it portends something very bad, and he doesn't know what to do. So he wants to go to all of the people who can decipher dreams, and nobody can give him an answer as to what's going on. If you like, there's some books right here if you want. Right, if you want to follow. So he doesn't know what to do. So he calls all the people who can do it, and nobody's able to give him an answer. So he calls. Right, the 2 people, the chamberlain of the butchers and chamberlain of the bakers, who were in jail, and they're out of jail now, and they tell him that they had this Hebrew youth, right, a Jewish guy, Joseph, who's in jail, and he was able to interpret dreams for us. Maybe he can do it for you. So Pharaoh goes and calls them, said they should come. They take him out of prison. So we're here at 225, beginning in the second parak. It says, Pharaoh sent and summons Joseph, and they rushed him from the dungeon. He shaved and changed his clothes, and he came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I dreamed a dream, but no one can interpret it. So there's a number of questions with this. The first thing is, so Pharaoh, right, he's desperate, so he's going to go to anybody who can give him an answer. He's told Joseph, Ken, as despicable as they feel the Hebrews are, right, they don't like to associate with them, especially royalty. Nevertheless, he wants an answer to his question. What's his dreams mean? So he's prepared to do whatever he has to do, and he goes to get Joseph. Now here you can imagine Joseph's been in jail for many years. Right, he's stuck in jail, and it's time for him to come out. And Pharaoh, who is the king, who Joseph knows is not his close friend, is summoning him. So you'd think Joseph's going to go, right? But it says that right, they go and they rush him. They rush to go to the dungeon to get him out. That means that they're in a hurry because Pharaoh wants him, and he won't leave until he shaves and changes his clothes. Right? A guy's been in jail. He's not necessarily they have his hair cut nicely and his beard trimmed and so forth. So he is going to do that before he goes. And the commentaries say that's a bit odd. Where does he have the peace of mind? Here he is, like you can imagine, you're in jail, and the king summons you. So first thing is the king summons you, and you don't do what you're supposed to do. It's going to go from being in jail to being dead, right? Second thing is you're in jail all this time. You want to get out. You don't want to just hang around. And nevertheless, he does. He says they're bringing him to Pharaoh, and he says, "Hold on a second. Let's stop over here. I'm going to get a haircut and a shave." And then they say, "Okay." And the way they let's stop over here. I need to buy a new suit before I go. So you can imagine all of the extra time that's involved. How does he come up with this idea that they can do such a thing? So here the point is that some of the commentaries tell us that Joseph felt it was necessary that he was presentable in front of the king. But you have to weigh the situation. It's one thing to say that the king calls me, I have to dress appropriately. Imagine if you're a prime minister or the president of the United States who wants to meet with you. You're not going to just, happen to be whatever you're wearing around the house. You're going to go and wear that. You're going to make sure that you look right. Right? So that's fine. But what if the president says, I want you now, and I'm taking you out of jail to bring you now? Now, you're going to say, I'm coming. Of course I'd rather look nice, but I'd rather be alive, and I'd rather be there than be here. Right? But nevertheless, Joseph doesn't do that. He basically does what he thinks is the right thing. And this is an indication to us of what we call the bitachon, or the actualized faith. In other words, there's two types. We really speak about two types of faith in Jewish life. There's emunah and bitachon. And to put it in a manner, emunah means faith. That is, I believe something. It's an intellectual understanding that, like for instance, let's say we're sitting indoors and you come in and you're wet and you're carrying a wet umbrella and you tell me it's raining. So I believe you that it's raining. I don't know for 100% sure. It depends how important it is for me to know. I have no reason not to believe you. You're an honest person. You were wet. I observed the rain. I observed your umbrella. So I can say that I believe you, but I don't know. Right? There's a difference. I believe you. I don't know. And for me to know, right, to actually go and do something, I have to experience it. I have to go myself and see. Right? Because let's say it was something very, very important. Like I have here in the shul. When people want to join the shul, sometimes I have to go through a process with them to verify that they're Jewish. Now you'll say, well, why would somebody want to join a shul if they're not Jewish? Or if you ask somebody, are you Jewish? They'll tell you. And that's fine on a personal level. I trust you. I have no reason not to trust you. On a personal level, I believe you're Jewish. But if you join my shul, basically what I'm telling the world from now on in your life is that I'm telling the world that I know you're Jewish. Not that I believe you're Jewish. I know you're Jewish. I know it. Because from now on, your children will get married as Jews because I said so. Right? It's based on my say, because I have to know this, not just believe it. So when it comes to you and me being friends, I believe you're Jewish. But in my position, I have to know it. Right? The difference between it is, of course, if I know something, then I'm going to act on it, and the actions will be totally with knowledge. Well, if I believe something, I'll act on it only to a certain point. Right? Only so far. I believe you're honest. So you know what? I believe you're honest. So you know, if I leave my wallet sitting at the desk and you're at my house, I'm not afraid you'll steal it. But I also believe you're honest. And if I leave $1 million sitting in my house and I go out of town for 3 weeks and you're there, that might be a little different. Right? That's one is belief and one is knowledge. So here, Joseph is acting, right, as if he has knowledge. That is to say, belief is faith. That means I believe something is true. I believe that God will take care of me. But when I act on that, when I actually act in a way that shows I believe it, that I really believe that God will take care of me, that's called bitachon. That's actualized faith. And that's really closer to knowledge. Right? In other words, I'm doing important things in my life on the belief that God exists. And that God promised me only good things will happen. Ultimately, everything is good. So therefore, if I really, really believe it, it's like knowing it, and then I'm going to act that way. And that's what Yosef does. Yosef says, I know that the right thing is that when you go to see a king, you have to dress appropriately. When you go to see a king, you don't do that with your hair undone. You don't go with half a beard. You go to look nice. He said, but wait a minute. Maybe Pharaoh will change his mind. You get thrown back in jail because you're taking too long. That if God wants me to be in jail, I'll be in jail. I know that Pharaoh is calling me, it's because really God wants me out of jail. So therefore, I have my obligations of making sure I'm presentable. God will do his job. Right? That's called bitachon. He's acting in that way. That's a high level. That's a person who really knows. And that's a level that we all have to work towards in order to be able to live. Because one of the main problems that people have is that we departmentalize ourselves. In other words, we'll say, you know, I believe in Torah, but then sometimes I get in a situation where I don't act like I believe in it. Right? Suddenly, a guy loses his job, and now he gets all worried. How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to do things? Then you worry and you worry and you worry. How about if you have a job and other people are losing their job, and then you already start worrying, I'm going to lose my job. Or you hear in the newspaper that people are going to lose their job, but nobody you know has lost their job, and you start worrying about it. Like, where do we draw a line? Like, where is worry appropriate? So the point is that if you truly believe that God will take care of you, and that you have to put in your effort, right? You can't be foolish, but that God is there for us, so that you won't get worried. And that's what Yosef does. Yosef says, oh, the king wants to see me. Well, I have an obligation, because of my beliefs, that I should look presentable when I go see the king. So if it means I'm going to take longer, and maybe the king will throw me back in jail, I'm not worried. If God wants me out of jail, I'll be out of jail. That's how he's doing this. And it's showing you a high level of his understanding. of how things are. And now he goes to see Pharaoh. And of course, those of us who've read the Parsha before, or even think about these dreams, you see that they're not good. And it basically talks about how they're going to have 7 good years. That is to say that the Nile will overflow and all the crops will be bumper crops for 7 years in a row, that the Egyptian economy will flourish. And then we'll have 7 years where things are bad, and it'll start to fall, it'll falter. And so therefore, by Joseph knowing this and telling this to Pharaoh, Joseph can help Pharaoh plan an economic plan. It's like, what's always the problem with when things change in the economy today is that we don't know what's going to change. You have one economist who says it's going to get terrible. Another one says it's going to be great. You don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So here God comes to you and says, you're going to have 7 great years. Any money you invest, anything you do is going to make money. But after that, you're going to have 7 bad years. So you do is you plan it. You say, well, for 7 good years, I'm going to invest all my money and make a lot of money. And then when the 7 bad years come, I'll have the money to live. And I'll have extra. So you plan that way. But we're not so fortunate. We don't have that. But in this case, Pharaoh was told this. And the real purpose of Pharaoh's told this is because this is how Joseph is going to become who he becomes, which is basically the number 2 man in all of Egypt. They call him Viceroy. Right, and he's the number 2 man, like the vice president. He has specific jobs of running the country, and the king is the king. So the only way that's going to happen is he's got to get out of jail. He has to see the Pharaoh, the king. He has to do something that the Pharaoh will give him authority, and then he has to do it. He has to actually perform. All right, all of that happens because of this. This is the beginning of it, and it has to happen in order for this to go on. So he goes through a whole discussion over the next few pages explaining about the famine and so forth and what happens. Right? And then, of course, you have Pharaoh and Joseph. Joseph's living there. He becomes the number 2 man. Pharaoh gives him a name. Right? And the 7 years begin. The 7 good years begin. And basically, Joseph is able to purchase, because there's so much food, he can purchase food cheaply. Right? When there's a big supply, and a lot of food, then it costs less, right? Like now, if there's terrible weather in Panama, so then Panamanian coffee is going to be more expensive because it doesn't grow so well. So everyone's going to sell their coffee for more money because the demand for coffee is greater than the supply. But if I've got so much coffee that everybody's got a lot, so the price has to go down. So now everybody's got a lot of grains and all types of things that they grow. So Joseph works out a plan that he's going to buy everything. He buys it cheap because everyone's got. Then he stores it.
I was wondering if he just was taking as a tax. He said 1/5 of each you have to put aside.
Correct. Right. But that's how he's acquiring it. Right. Basically, because what he's doing is he's giving them, for instance, the people have a certain amount of ownership. Right. So what he does is he works out a system that eventually the Pharaoh ends up owning all the farms, because the people have to give a certain percentage, and eventually, after the 7 years, they lose, because they don't know that there's going to be 7 bad years. Only Pharaoh and Joseph know. So the people spend all their money. They say, I'm a millionaire. They go out and they take expensive trips and buy yachts and airplanes, and now they have no money. And now the next year comes and they don't get it. Their salary's not coming because nothing grows. So they have to go to Pharaoh and they say, we need to buy from you. So Pharaoh's got warehouses full of food. He got cheap, right, from them. And they said, well, what are you going to sell me? Well, we'll sell you our farms, and you give us food. So they became sharecroppers. That is, the Pharaoh owned the land, and they're able to work on the land, but they have to share it now 50-50 because it belongs to Pharaoh. They get a percentage, but Pharaoh gets most of it. And then eventually, that doesn't sustain them either, and they have nothing to sell, so they sell themselves. And in this case, now Pharaoh owns the people, right? And he supports them. So now he doesn't have to give them anything. He only has to feed them, because he owns the people and he owns the land. That was the end result. And through Joseph's work, that Pharaoh became that powerful. I mean, that's just an economic plan that he had. So,
and Joseph bought for Pharaoh, not for himself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, we see that not only in Egypt, where there's 7 bad years, but the whole world, the known world at that time, had 7 bad years. And therefore people had to come to Egypt to buy food, or they were going to starve to death. And that's exactly what happens. The people from Israel, meaning the Jewish people, who then were just Hebrews, they sent down a delegation to Egypt to buy food because they needed to eat. And who is it? Jacob sends his sons to go down. So now you have his sons go down to Egypt, and they're going to meet Joseph, who is another son who they think is dead. They have no idea what happened to him. And they're going to meet him. They don't realize who it is. Right? There are many reasons why. He looks like an Egyptian. He speaks Egyptian. Right? He's an adult. He was a child when they got rid of him. So they don't realize who he is at first. So it shows here now on 233 that they come down, and Joseph, who is now the powerful man, it says that he saw his brothers. He recognizes them, but he acts like a stranger, and he asks them, where you come from? And they tell him that they come from Canaan, which is the land of Israel. And it says he recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. And then he remembers now the dreams that he had in last week's parsha, that all of his brothers are going to bow down to him. And that's exactly what happens. They come in, and he's number 2 to the king. They come in and bow down and say, "Sir, can we buy food from you?" So he remembers his dreams, and they actually came true. Right? And what does he do? He says he accuses them of being spies. He says because he saw that first thing, the way they came, instead of all coming as a group, because they were a very powerful-looking group. Imagine you had 10 brothers come down together, very powerful people. So what they did is they said, we're going to split up, and we're going to each come in through a different gate. That way nobody will see us as a group, and they won't be afraid of us. Because they didn't want people to be afraid. So they split up. But Joseph, who understood this, he uses that as a way of attacking them. They say they wanted to do it so people shouldn't be afraid. But Joseph says, no, you're doing it because you're spies. You don't want anyone to notice you. So you're spies. Right? That's what he says. And of course he knows they're not spies, but he's accusing them of that. Right? And then you have this whole discussion that you're not spies, then bring me the youngest brother. The youngest brother, of course, is his brother. Right? In other words, Joseph only has one full brother. All the rest are half brothers. He has his mother and father, right, only have 2 sons. Right? His mother is Rachel, his father is Yaakov. Yaakov and Rachel only have 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin, and that's it. Right? And so they don't want to bring him. They say, we bring down Benjamin, something happens to him, our father's going to kill us. Our father's going to die, because he lost 1 son already. Right? So this is, of course, a very ironic idea, because these same brothers sold Yosef and didn't really seem to care that their father would be upset. And now they say, we can't do it because our father's going to be upset. Right? It shows you that they're sort of funny.
Or you have a conscience.
Maybe, but Joseph sees it as, what do you mean? You're so worried about your brothers. That's why he keeps asking them later on, when they bring the brother down. He says, "Is my father?" He reveals who he is. He says, "Is my father still alive?" Then what kind of question is that? My father's still alive? He says, "Well, you told me that if Benjamin, right, the youngest brother, wasn't brought back, my father would die. So did he die? He didn't die. You didn't care about him when you sold me. So you care so much about him with Benjamin? So did he die? No, he didn't die. What are you talking about? You guys are making it up." That was his point here. So
Joseph actually wasn't a very nice guy, because he took all these Egyptians from being free men and worked out a plan that they would eventually become slaves to the Pharaoh.
Well, they weren't really slaves. I think that we have to understand the system of how the world ran. Like a king, even up until modern times, until the late 1800s, a king of a country, basically his belief was he owned his subjects. They're subjects. Right? He owns them. And this is everywhere in the world is this way. And the treasury of the government is basically his private money. Right? That's what a king has. A king owns the country and owns the people. So all of the money that's collected for taxes is his money. But that's how the world was until you had the French Revolution, when people became free. And then you had ideas of democracy, and you had people having human rights, and they could have their own things, they could own land. All of this was a new idea. This didn't happen so much before then. Joseph basically put him in a situation where it was no different than anywhere else. The being in that he also made it possible for them to be alive, that they would be able to live. Because if they didn't do this, they would have starved to death. If Yosef did not come and work out this whole plan, then everyone would have starved to death. He made it possible for them to live. Now, the fact that he did it in a way that gave a lot of power to Pharaoh, that's his job. His job is, he's Pharaoh's front man. That's just what he does. And since this was the norm, I wouldn't say that he was a bad person. On the one hand, he helped. On the other hand, he created a system that put Pharaoh at par with the other people of the world. That's really how they did it. And this lasted for thousands of years, this concept, throughout the world.
And so his brothers changed so much when they started to care so much about Benjamin, while they didn't care about Joseph at all.
Well, that's Joseph's problem. Joseph is saying, you're not being honest. And you're saying, if we bring our youngest brother down here, we're so afraid our father will die. He said, what do you mean? You weren't afraid when you did that to me? Now, he doesn't say that to them because they don't know it's him. But that's what he's doing, is he's pushing the envelope. He's setting up a situation so that is as follows. When they sold him, they sinned, right? It was wrong to sell him or to try to kill him. That was a wrong thing to do. So he's setting up a situation where they're put in this same situation again, where they can save themselves by giving up this one brother. And if they do it, everything will be fine. If they don't do it, right, then they're going to have trouble. So Joseph actually wants them to not do it, right? Ultimately, because he wants to show that they've changed, they've become better people, that there was an error, right, and that the situation was different. He wants them to stand up to him, which eventually they do. That's really the goal. It's not that he wants them to fail again to prove his point, right? He wants to be able to make a system so they can atone for what they did, so that God doesn't hold them liable for it anymore. That's really the basis. It's because he cares for them, not because he didn't care. It was the opposite. So as it goes on, right, we have now at the end the most famous story. I'm going through it a bit quickly because I want to speak about Hanukkah as well before we run out of time. So we get to the end, like at 2:45, where now what's happened is that they come back with Binyamin. And he sets up this situation where Binyamin is taken as a prisoner by him, right? On purpose, in order so that he should see that they're going to fight him, right? That's the whole idea, that they should go to do that. And then of course it goes on where they're building up this confrontation, which in next week's parsha ends. But he does is he takes his brothers, he brings them to his own home rather than to the palace, and he has a meal with them, and this whole situation goes on. Now what he does is he hides his cup inside of the packet, into the suitcase of his brother Binyamin, so that when Binyamin leaves with the rest of the family, he sends his men out to go. He says, they stole my cup. Like, these are guests of my house, and they stole my special gold cup. So he sends his men to go get it. So of course he didn't steal it. He put it there on purpose. So they find the cup. Right now this man Binyamin is a thief, right, the youngest brother. So they come back and he puts him in jail, right, which really ends this part of the parsha. But there's an interesting thing, is because he goes and he says that how dare you steal? You come to my country. You ask me to sell you food. I invite you into my private home because you're dignitaries, you're special people. Right? I give you a meal. I treat you nicely. I give you a great price. Now you take the stuff and off you go back to your Canaan, Israel, and you steal my cup. Now of course they didn't steal it. He put it in there and they didn't know it. And it was all done in order so that the brothers should react and want to save Binyamin, and then they're atoning for what they did for Joseph. But an interesting point is that he tells them, how can you steal my cup? Don't you know that a man like me needs this cup? So what does it mean? Is that Joseph used this cup supposedly to do magic. It was we hear about magic, right? In modern times we hear about like a magic wand. People have a magic wand, right? Or they read tea leaves, right? The different things that we hear about. But there was certainly a thing where a person had a cup, and they would put a liquid, say wine, into the cup, and they would be able to tell the future, supposedly with the help of this cup. That was the idea, right? And the idea, right, was that they would use magic. Now, Jewish people don't do this. We have a relationship with God. It's understood as follows. The word for magic, when he talks about this, is like for it's a witch, it's called a machshefa, right? And the word meaning in there is magic. I'm going to see if I can actually. It's just coming up here. I want to find the actual story because it has a very interesting point of what happens. I did see my drinks, and he overtook them. He says to them, "Why does the Lord say it's going to be sacrilegious for your servants to do such a thing?" Like they said, "Why?" He says, "Why do you repay evil for good?" Right? You went and you took the cup from which my master drinks, and he regularly divines. Right? Divines means he does magic. So the word that they use here. It says nachesh hinachesh. Nachesh hinachesh means that I do magic with it. Right now, the word nachesh is the same word as nachash, which means a snake. And the idea being is that a snake, when a snake travels on the ground, it doesn't travel straight. They go like this, right? That's how they move. They move like an S. They don't, nothing straight with them. And that's what magic is. Magic is, how does things work in this world? You want something, you have to work for it. You do something, you have to deserve it, right? Nothing is free. Nothing comes differently. Anything, it makes no difference who you are, how much money you have. You want something, you have to work for it. Maybe you worked for it before, but you got to work for it. You got to pay for it. You got to put in effort for anything you want in this world. That's called being straight. That's the way the world runs. That's how God set up the world. That's how we Jews live in the world. However, there are people who think, no, I don't have to do that. I can find sort of a crooked way, like an S. I can find a crooked way. How? With magic. Magic makes it possible for me to acquire something and not work for it. If I want a new car, I can use magic to get a new car. I don't have to use money to get a new car. I don't have to work for the money to have it to buy the car. And therefore, the word here that they use for magic has in its root word nachash, snake, which means a snake which goes like this. It doesn't go straight. So too, magic doesn't go straight. That's why Yosef says, "You stole my cup. You know who I am. I am the number 2 man in Egypt. I'm the one who understands the future. You know, for me to be who I am, I must be doing magic, and you stole my magic cup." That's what he says. So how can you do such a thing? I did all this good for you, and that's how you do it. The point being that it's the one thing that Joseph, as a Jew, as a Hebrew, would never do. Because he understood that how the world runs. And the point being that magic is a way of getting through the world incorrectly. The real world doesn't work like that. And that's really the point that he's making here. Right? That magic we don't really use magic. Such people like Pharaoh, they would try to do that. All right, and then the parsha ends, of course, with him taking Binyamin, or wanting to take Binyamin. And it's sort of like it's almost like a cliffhanger, and it's an important thing to note. You have on television what they call a cliffhanger. The show goes, and at the end of the show, you're right at the point when you're going to have the answer. What's going to happen, right? What's going to happen? Or they used to have the serial movies back in the old days, where you'd watch, and at the end of the movie, like the horse is about to go off the cliff. Is he going to go off the cliff, or is he going to get saved? Will it go off the cliff and the guy jumps off, or does he not jump off? What's going to happen? You don't know. And you can't wait till next week to come back and see the next one. Right? That's called a cliffhanger, right? He's hanging on the edge of the cliff. He's going to fall off or not. That's what happens here. Here you've got there's about to be an enormous confrontation. Here you have the second most powerful person in the world. This is Joseph. Yosef is the second most powerful. That's number 2 to Pharaoh, who's the king of Egypt, which is the only country that has an economy. Everything else is destroyed in the world because there's no food. So now he's going to have a confrontation with the Hebrews, who are these strong spiritual people. Right? Now they don't know that he's one of them. So they're about to go like this. Right? I mean, these two giants in the world are about to go to war because he took the youngest brother. The fact that they were going to go to war shows Yosef that they're changed, that they're better people. They didn't just say, "Okay, keep them," and leave. But that's about to happen. And then the parsha ends, and you have to wait, so to speak, till next week when you go to shul to hear what happens. Of course, we can turn the page. We know what happens, and we've turned the page before. But you have to ask, why did the rabbis set up the weekly parshas in such a way that the end of this week's parsha is an unanswered question? We don't know what's going to happen next. And the commentaries answer that the reason that this is a question to us today, why this bothers us, is exactly why they did it. Because what bothers us? We're living in a world today where you're full of instant everything. Like I remember as a kid, maybe some of you remember, you go into a car, You want to listen to the radio. You had to turn on the radio. You had to wait for it to warm up. Remember that? I had tubes. You had to wait for the radio to warm up. It didn't just turn on. In your house, you turn on a television set. You had to wait for it to warm up. First it was black, then there was a little line, and then the line would expand, and finally you'd get this black and white television. But it had to warm up. You had to wait for the tubes to warm up before it would work. Now, everything was like that. Today, the world is full of disposable things. You know, you want to try to take it. You got a clock radio, right? It breaks. You go to get it fixed. The guy says it costs more to fix it than it does to buy a new one. Buy yourself a new one. Like, we live in a world, everything's disposable, right? Everything is instant, and you can get, and it has no long-term worth. And it's like this: TV goes out instantly. Like, what's the big selling feature of an Apple computer? Boom, you can turn it on and it's on. A PC, you turn it on, it takes 8 minutes for this to go and this to go and this to go, and finally it works. But an Apple computer, I can like, you know, someone will tell me, okay, you have a meeting at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, I can turn on my computer. I can do something, turn it off, and still be there on time. Like, it's that fast, right? This idea of something instantaneous has gotten us, right, our society, used to that. This is the norm, that everything happens right away. And this parsha is telling us that's not how things are. That's not how the world is. The world is not everything is right away. Things take time. And not only that, you can't make decisions based on things being instantaneous, because things will take time. Like, you know, things happen to us in our lives, and sometimes when they happen in our lives, things seem really bad. You know, somebody gets sick, somebody loses a job and gets sick, right? You know, these things, and you say to yourself, what did I do that God should do this to me? Right? But then you wait 6 months, and it turns out that everything was fine. The person wasn't that sick, and they got better. Right? And the job that you lost, you got another job, and you made more money. Or you finally are happy now that you found a job that you like. Now, very often that happens, right? That something will happen, you'll say, what am I going to do? I can't make a living. Suddenly you get a job for twice what you were making before. It's like, in order to get that new job, you had to lose this one. Right? Because you can't have two jobs. But today, I wake up in the morning, I have no job. And I'm worried, right? Because it's instant. I need instant answers. I send you an email, right? Like, you know, it happens, like, people send me emails, and because I have a phone that does email, they expect I'm going to give them an answer any time of the day, like within 10 minutes. Now, the fact is, I do it most of the time, because it doesn't bother me. It's easy to do. But if I don't, I'll start getting emails like, is everything okay? Where are you? What's going on? How come that's happening? Right? Why aren't you answering? Right? They'll get frustrated, right? I'll have very often, like, women will call me from the grocery store, and they'll say, is this item kosher? And I don't mind. It's fine with me. They can do that. In fact, sometimes they even take a picture of their camera and send me the little thing to tell me, so I know what brand it is. So I said, but let's say they don't reach me, so people get frustrated. It has to be now. Right? In our lives, when things are really important, right? There are lots of times in our lives when somebody's sick and somebody loses a job, or our children are in trouble, or things aren't going well, and we say, like, why did God do this to us? And in the end, it all works out. It all works out in the end. Things happen, but it takes time. And we're used to it happening like that. So this parsha teaches us, by the fact that it ends here, the rabbis are telling you, this is a good thing to know, that things take time. That it looks like the world is falling apart. It looks like God is being mean to you. It looks like God is punishing you. But that's not the case. You can't get a better job until you lose the job you've got. You can't get stronger until you've done something that might injure you, but you'll get stronger from it. In all of these cases, things take time. And the rabbis purposely stopped this here, according to some commentaries, to teach us that lesson, so that we have to wait till next week. Because all it would have taken is if they just started the next week's parsha 5 lines later, and we would have had the answer as to what happens. But they purposely waited to teach us that lesson. And it's a significant, important lesson to know, because it happens throughout our lives, especially the older we get. The more we have involvement with people, and with our children, our grandchildren, and so forth, you know, we start to see these things in our lives, and we need to realize things are not going to be answered immediately. And that's an important point. I want to take, let me see where we are. Yeah, I want to take a few minutes just to talk a bit about Hanukkah. And there's a lot to say about Hanukkah. We spoke about it during the week. I just want to look up something in the Siddur, which I have here, just to be able to read it to you. That'll give it a little bit different significance. It's not going to show me yet. All right. It says in the Siddur, on Hanukkah, of course, we say a prayer. It's called Al Hanisim. It's inside of the silent prayer, or the Amida, the Shemona Esrei, all names for the same prayer. And in there, we add during Hanukkah. We say one similar during Purim. But in Hanukkah, it talks about Hanukkah, and it says, V'al Anisim, and you say, I praise God for all the miracles, and how He saved us, and He took care of us, and He shielded us through all of the wars, and everything that had to do with the story of Hanukkah. And then it relates about Matisyahu, and it says a number of things that God did. Let me see. Can you grab that book on the bottom there, and I'll read it to you. It'll be much easier.
This one?
Yeah. Thank you. So right here, you'll find this in the prayers, and also in the Birkat HaMazon. When you say Birkat HaMazon on, whenever you eat bread, you'll also find this in here on the holidays, and it's here. So it says, the days of Matisyahu, right, who was the Kohen Gadol, who was one of the Hashmonim, right, they stood up against the Greeks, who were evil, fighting the Jews. And why? It says, Lashkicham Torasecha, to make them forget the Torah, Vira Mechuke Ritzanecha, and to cause them to sin against your will, God. V'ata barachamecha rabim, you, in your great mercy, amarata lehem be'etzrasam, God, you stood in front of them to guard them when they were in trouble. Rafta is read of them, you were jealous for them. Danta es dinam, you judged the people who hurt them. Nikamtes nevasam, you took what do you call it? What's the word? A vengeance. You took vengeance against the people. And here's what did God do? It says, Misarta Gaborim Biyad Chalashim. You handed over the strong ones against the weak ones. Well, that's a miracle. You have a big, strong army of the Greeks, right, who represented the known world of their day, who's fighting against the Hebrews. Now, you understand that the story. There's a lot of odd things about the story of Hanukkah. The first of which, we know that the Jews had an army. The army was from the tribe of Yehuda. The tribe of Yehuda were the kings. Right? They were the army. They were the kings. They were the military. They were the dignitaries of the Jewish people. They came from Yehuda. Right? And so whenever you had a war, it was Yehuda who fought the war for the Jewish people. But in this case of Hanukkah, it wasn't. I just told you it was the Maccabees. The Maccabees were Kohanim. They were priests. So here's what happens. You have the Greeks attacking the Jewish people to destroy them, right? And so the Jews say, we have to go to war. So let's send the priests. It's like, imagine the United States government decides it's going to go to war against the Jews in Canada. So what do? We say, we're going to send the accountants to fight. We're going to get all the CAs and the Jewish CAs in Canada, and they're going to go to war against the American government. Are you crazy? It's one thing, okay, for whatever reason they decide they're going to fight the Jews in Canada. I don't know why, but they decide they're going to. So what are we going to do? We're going to get all the tough guys to go fight them. Get a bunch of accountants to fight them? How's that going to do any good? And that's what happens here. Here the Greek army, which represented the whole world, is going to war against this little group of Jewish people living in this little land called Israel. And they go to attack them, and what do we say? All right, we're going to fight back. We're sending the accountants. They sent priests. Guys who worked in the temple. That's what they said. They weren't military. They weren't trained in weaponry. They were priests. It's an odd thing. So therefore it makes sense when it says, what did you do, God? You handed over the strong, the army of the Greeks, against the weak. The priests. It means the priests won. They won the war. That's a miracle. Rabbi miad ma'atim. It's also the many. There was an enormous army of the Greeks against a few. There wasn't that big an army of the Jews. It was a small group. Utmeim biyad tahorim, and those who were spiritually impure against those who were spiritually pure. And then it says Rishoim biyad tzadikim, and the evil people were handed over to the righteous. Now, these two statements are odd, because up until now we've shown you that in war, what usually happens? You have a big army against a small army, usually the big army wins. And also, if you have an army of strong people versus weak people, the strong people win. That's usually what happens. So in this case, God made a miracle. The strong people, who were the Greeks, attacked the weak people, who were the Jewish priests, and the priests won. And in that case, that the entire Greek army attacked the Jewish people, and there's a lot of them and a few of us, and usually the many win against the few, but here the few won. That makes sense. But then it says, the spiritually impure, right, who fought against the spiritually pure, you made the spiritually pure win. Right? The Greeks were spiritually impure. They were they were anti-God, anti-Judaism, and the Jews were pure. They were Jewish. Right? They were following the Torah. But who says that somebody who's impure is stronger than somebody who's pure? Like, where do they get the idea that somebody who is like a follower of idol worship is stronger than a person who follows the Torah? Where do you get that idea from? And who says it's true? And what kind of a miracle is that? And then it says, and the evil people against the righteous. So you want to tell me evil people are stronger than righteous people? Maybe righteous people are stronger than evil people. How do you know this is a miracle? That God took the evil Greeks and made them lose against the righteous Jews. Doesn't make sense. These two parts of the prayer, right, they don't fit, right, with everything else. You understand what I'm saying? Right, you have many against the few. The many should win. The few won because God helped. You have the strong against the weak. The strong should win, but they didn't. The weak won because God helped. You have the impure versus the pure. Well, wait a minute. Who says the impure should win? Just because they're impure. You have the evil against the righteous. Well, who says that the evil would win? The fact that God made a miracle against that the righteous should win, why not a miracle that? Maybe they would have won anyways. So the point is that we're not thinking of it correctly. There's no question that the strong against the weak and the many against the few is certainly the Greeks. It's talking about the Greek army. It's actually the Syrian Greeks. As the Greeks conquered everything, so the Greeks who came from Syria are the ones, that's Antiochus. They came in to fight the Jews who were in Israel. They didn't send Greeks from Greece. They sent Greeks from Syria, which is right next to Israel, to attack them. Right? So that's fine. The many against the few and the strong against the weak. Right? But then the prayers really changes, because when it talks about the impure against the pure and the evil against the good, it's not talking about a war between Greeks and Jews. Now it's talking about a war between Jews and Jews. It's a total change. It's a total different thing it's referring to. Because you have to understand the sociological reality of what was going on. When the Jews were living in Greece, the Jews living there were in a situation where the Greek philosophy and civilization was very attractive. It's something you wanted to be a part of. It was you made a living. People had human rights. Right? They were able to do the things that they wanted to do. They had philosophy and art, and they could marry whoever they wanted to marry. They could do anything. Right? That's what the Greeks did. Right? That was who the Greeks were. So many Jews, the majority of the Jewish people in Israel, became what we call Hellenists, followers of Greek culture. Right? That means that the amount of Jews who were operating the temple, who were following Jewish law, was very small compared to the great amount of Jews who had already given up. They already assimilated. They became Greeks. So now we've talked about the war with the Greeks, but you have to also realize there was a war against the Jews against the Jews, because you had these Jews who had already given up being Jewish. They had already pushed everything Jewish away from themselves and had become Greek. And this group came in and said, no, we must remain true to Jewish culture. We must remain true to the Torah, to Judaism. We have to follow it. And the other people, the impure versus the pure, the evil versus the good, right? That is talking about a war of Jew against Jew. Now, it's not that the Jewish leaders, those priests, like Matisyahu, right, and the other people we know from the story of Hanukkah, wanted to hurt other Jews. That wasn't their intent. We have an understanding that we learn in the Gemara. It says that our goal in the world is to rid the world of evil, not to rid the world of evildoers. We want evildoers to become good. We don't want to kill them. Right? That's not the goal. The goal is get rid of the evil in the world, then evil people will be good people. Right? That's the idea. So here they went to war with these Jewish people who became evil. In other words, they not only themselves followed the Greek life, but they denied the Jewish people who followed the Torah to continue doing it. Because when there was all these laws made. You can't learn Torah, you can't keep Shabbos, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the Greeks made the laws, but the Jews who followed those laws, right, who left Judaism, were a part of that. So therefore the Jews, we know about, who went to war, they also went to war against this Jewish majority who gave up Judaism. And that's why it says it was the impure against the pure and the evil against the good. Because it's not talking about the Jews against the Greeks. Here it's talking about Jew against Jew. And eventually, every Jew who went to war had to decide, am I staying in the Hellenist or am I going to come back to Judaism? And there was more Hellenists than Jews, right, that were loyal to Judaism. And therefore, it was the many against the few. It was the impure against the pure. That's what it's talking about. And ultimately, the Jews had to make an effort to try to get those Jews to come back to Judaism. And if they would, great. If they didn't, then they were lost. They were lost. This was a fight for Jews to remain Jewish. One of the main differences between Hanukkah and Purim is that Hanukkah, you notice that we don't celebrate Hanukkah like we celebrate Purim. Purim, we eat, we drink, we give gifts to people get drunk. Because on the holiday of Purim, the Persians, Haman, right, Achashverosh, they wanted to kill the Jews. The Jews, the DNA, Jewish DNA should be destroyed. There should be no more Jews in the world. That's what their goal was. They should be gone. But the Greeks didn't want that. The Greeks wanted the Jews to be alive. They wanted them to pay taxes. They wanted them to live. But they wanted them to be Greek. They wanted them to give up Judaism. They wanted them to follow the Greek philosophy. They wanted them to worship idols. They wanted them to become part of the whole Greek culture, not the Jewish culture. So that if they had their way, they wouldn't kill a single Jew, because you can't pay taxes when you're dead. And they took over the country. But as long as the Jews wouldn't follow their belief system, then they had to go to war. That's what they were fighting. It was the Greeks fighting against the Jews because the Jews wouldn't become Greek. But not because they wouldn't give up the country. And therefore, when the Jews who became Greek, right, were there, which was the majority, we were going to lose everything. Judaism would be gone. This is a war of assimilation. Where they're opting out. They're leaving. Them and all of their children are gone forever. And therefore, this war was a war to bring them back. So certainly it wasn't the goal to kill those people. The goal was to bring them back. Right? It was a war of freedom of religion in order to do religion, to accomplish the religion. Right? Today we have a thing, there's a freedom of religion in Canada and the United States. And for most people, it's freedom not to do religion. I have the freedom not to do it. You want me to go in my public school and to sing Christmas songs? I have the freedom not to do that. You also have the freedom to participate in Jewish things, but we choose not to. People choose not to do that. Right? You have both ways. But what they're saying here is that we're going to war to fight against assimilation, so that and our goal is to have freedom of religion to do religion. We have to practice our religion. And that's what they went to war for. And that's why it was appropriate that it wasn't the army who fought this war. The army would fight to save your body. That's what the purpose of the army is. This was a war of the soul, where they wanted to destroy Judaism. The most appropriate people to fight that war are the priests, because they represent the soul. That's what they did. They're representing the temple and our relationship with God. So if you're going to go to war against Judaism, you're fighting the people who are promoting Judaism. If you go to war against Jews, then you fight the army. So the best indication that they weren't fighting to kill the Jews, they were fighting to rid the world of Judaism and Jewish belief and Jewish ethics, was that it was the priests who fought against them. That's how we know. The priests were the perfect example. So therefore, we see that the holiday of Hanukkah is very interesting, because if you look in the world today, many, many people see Hanukkah as simply the Jewish Christmas. I mean, in the world today, there's a spirit of brotherhood and friendliness and giving, right? That's all going on, right? And it's a nice thing that people do this, right? But you have that feeling, and it's the non-Jewish world that's doing it. Whatever reason that they're doing it, because they care, or do it because they want to make money, whatever the reason is, it happens. And of course, we live here, we want to be a part of it. But we can't practice. We don't practice their religion. So what do people do? They say, well, Hanukkah is the same thing. It's warmth and it's nice and we light candles and we give gifts. It's very similar. But it's not at all similar. Because the whole purpose of Hanukkah is that we do not assimilate. We are not like the rest of the world. We are different. This was a war. That the purpose of the war of Hanukkah was a war because the world said to us, come and celebrate Christmas season with us. And give up your Jewish stuff. And we said, no, we're not going to do it. So for us to think at all that Hanukkah is like Christmas for the Jewish people, right? That means that we have absolutely no understanding of what Hanukkah is. It's the exact opposite. It would be easier for me to believe that you could say that Yom Kippur is Christmas for the Jewish people than Hanukkah is Christmas for the Jewish people. Because the whole purpose of Hanukkah was to fight against that idea, that we're going to celebrate our religion and we're going to give it up, we're going to assimilate into your religion. Hanukkah says you can't do that. That's exactly what we fought for. Of all of the holidays that people think that, this is the one holiday that is the totally most inappropriate. So it's not that I in any way condemn people who are like that, right? Who's they don't really observe much and they're doing this. Celebrating Hanukkah is better than not celebrating Hanukkah. It's true. But the underlying message is that Jews have to remain Jewish, and Jews practice Judaism. The world doesn't have to be Jewish. We don't look to make them Jewish. We're not trying to convert them, but we can't give it up. And if we and the message that Hanukkah tells us is that that's the right idea. You can't give it up. So just a thought there on Hanukkah for you.
I have a question. So after the war, did a number of Jews come back to Judaism? Or?
Yeah, some did, and some were killed. Because remember, it wasn't just that they left Judaism, is that they became part and parcel of the Greeks, which means that some of them actually went to war against the Jews. Mm-hmm. Because it was, you have a group of Jews following the old practices, looking the old way, eating the old foods, doing the temple stuff. And then you have these modern new Jews who are free, and they're liberated, and they are part of the culture that they're in. And when they see the Jews who are the other way, right, they desperately are embarrassed by that. How can you do this? You're so backwards and old-fashioned. Come, it's modern times. Come with the Greeks. So when they wouldn't do it and they made a stand, there were Jews on both sides who were prepared to be violent in order to stop this from either way, to stop the Jews from keeping the Torah and to stop them from not. So certainly there was, throughout the process, some who came back. But we lost many, many people because of it. We lost them to assimilation. We lost them to death. Both ways, because it was a very difficult time. It was not just a war of the Jews against the Greeks. It was a war of Judaism against Hellenism. And among the Hellenists were a lot of Jews. And therefore there was Jew against Jew. And it's a horrible thing to think about, that actually happened, but it did. And eventually, we're the ones who remain behind. Right? What today, the fact that you're here today means that your family, right, were among those people who stayed Jewish. That's why you're here today. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. They assimilated. You're gone. Now, after all these generations, you wouldn't be there. So it's an important thing. It's an important message to us when we are in the world today. Like, I've been promoting. We have these gift boxes that one of the organizations made of like this beautiful box, and it talks all about Hanukkah, and it has Hanukkah cookies and chocolate inside. And the purpose is that you buy these boxes at $5. This is what it cost us, and you give them to a neighbor or a friend as a gift on Hanukkah, for Hanukkah. And they look at the box, and it has all this information about Hanukkah, and it has something nice in it. It gives you an opportunity to explain to them a bit about their own religion and to be friendly. So with the way the world is today, we're in a situation that's not that terribly different. So we than what it was then, where people were assimilating. So these actions help us bring out the idea in people that we need to remain Jewish.